The resignation of Jabu Mabuza as the chair at Eskom. It comes at a time where we're experiencing load shedding. Today, Eskom releasing a statement saying that we don't expect any load shedding today. But remember, it's always predicated by the system is still restrained and very constrained and very vulnerable. Let's bring in Ted Blom now. He's an energy analyst. Ted, thank you very much indeed for your time. I want you to listen to this clip that we have from Batabi Dlamini talking about the appointment of Jabu Mabuza.
Both the president and the deputy president have acknowledged that there is a challenge. And therefore, the next step now is to ensure that we put the correct people here with expertise and technical understanding of the issues of energy. Because for us as women, energy means our safety. It means liberation because we are no longer hewers of wood. And therefore we benefit, and hospitals, there is electricity.
Was Jabu Mabuza the wrong person for the job?
I think we took a haphazard decision. So we have time to think now and have a correct person, a professional.
Ted, haphazard decision. You agree?
Absolutely. I said at the time that the new board was appointed that the board was incompetent in terms of fit for purpose and to lead Eskom forward. And it's unfortunate that another 2 years have been wasted at Eskom. It's piled up probably another 80 billion rands worth of debt, and technically it's in a no better space. In fact, it's worse than what it was when that board was appointed 2 years ago.
Should and will the board follow suit?
I think so. As I said, the whole board had a lack of expertise. There was one person who had previously served at the regulator, and even under difficult circumstances. But as for the rest of the board, no, they were all novices.
This decision for Jabu Mabuza to step down, does it show, is it a positive sign in terms of it showing responsibility or accountability from him?
Well, I think it's accountability at last. It's been a long time. I've said on various occasions that the board is not capable of leading and sorting out Eskom's problems. And the problems now are legacy problems. They've been there and they've been nesting for more than 20 years. And in fact, I'm not convinced that the whole of the Eskom cliff has been fully exposed. I think only half of the story has been exposed. And even when the Eskom board one day realizes that there's a massive problem on the coal feeding side, they've got big surprises coming their way, because on the other side, there's nobody to fulfill those coal needs.
When the Eskom management sits down with the president and says, sir, we don't expect load shedding until the 13th of January, what do they believe that? What do they consider when taking that decision?
Okay, so that to me is just another symptom of the incompetence, because anybody who understands power wouldn't give a categorical undertaking that load shedding wouldn't happen. As Eskom has itself said, load shedding is a system-induced relief to save the grid. And to say that, and this is my big concern, is that there seems to be a lot of politicking going on here, and Eskom is the ball in the game. Anybody who wants to avoid load shedding doesn't understand that by doing that, he's actually putting the whole grid at risk. And if the grid falls over, we're talking about 10 to 20 years of darkness.
Right. So let's look at it from an Eskom's worker point of view. I mean, you see these statements being released that Eskom's workers are working tirelessly to get the system back online. What are they doing?
Well, that's part of the problem, is that most of the refurbishment work is actually subcontracted out. So the cliche that Eskom is working 24 hours a day, day and night, 7 days a week, is actually not entirely true. It's just another cliche.
So when you hear that the president was misled, you agree with that?
Well, seemingly somebody told a lie. Either the president was misled or he was not misled. The presidency did come out and say that the president was not misled. You'll recall that statement. Mr. Mabuza said the president was misled. Well, the facts of the matter seem to be that there was some undertaking given to the political heads of this country by the Eskom board, and that is confirmed in the statement that Mr. Mabuza made in his resignation note.
Andre de Ruyter steps in. The chair of the board steps out. Does this put de Ruyter on the back foot?
Absolutely, because the chairman has actually been acting CEO for the last 4 odd months and intricately involved in a lot of the Eskom decision making. And for him to leave without a proper handover, less than a week's handover to the new incumbent, is just throwing the new incumbent into deep water. Especially so because the new incumbent hasn't got an engineering background.
Right.
And that was one of the requirements which I put on the table, and I believe Mr. Pravin Gordhan also required that. But somehow the election process for a new CEO omitted to have that qualification in its requirements.
And De Ruyter has so much on his shoulders, and I guess the public will be looking to him to solve this crisis. Is it a bit unfair to put him in this position in order to say this is the savior that will rectify everything?
If he had no hand in his appointment, I'd say it's very unfair and very misdirected. Unfortunately, it seems to me that he put his hat in the ring. So one assumes that he thought himself competent and able and fit for purpose to solve this problem. So there's no excuses. He's now got to deliver the solution.
Right. I mean, the goal obviously is to get back to normality, but is this a manageable crisis?
It's more than getting back to normality. On the one side, it's the load shedding and the interruption, and most mining companies and big investors are going to be really upset if they arrive at work with workers that they've got to pay on Monday morning, and there's inadequate power to carry the economy.
Yeah.
So that's the one problem. The other side of the problem, and which has now sort of been obliterated by the crisis, is that this has been 10 years in coming. The corruption at Medupi and Kusile and Ndupi and Ngula occurred in 2006, 2007, 2008. And together with that, the horrific tariff increases over the last 12 years of over 500%. That's what's killed the economy and caused millions. My estimate is at least 3 million new jobs being lost.
The presidency releasing a statement. I just want to read something out to you with regards to the self-generation. I want to get an understanding of what this means. Presidency saying they're in the proceedings with measures to introduce new generation capacity, including self-generation, in the shortest possible time. What does that mean?
Okay, so what the government seems to now be doing is calling for the private sector to engage and actually to just take the lead in adding capacity to the economy, not just to the grid, but to the economy. And that's where major users would then self-generate and not feed into the grid necessarily, but at least take themselves off the grid and ease the burden on the grid. Unfortunately, I don't think that's adequate to solve the problem. I think more drastic measures are, in fact, needed.
Such as?
The importation immediately of power barges or similar, either on land or on water, for at least a 3 to 4 year period.
Okay, break that down for us. How would that work?
So you sign the agreements, you give the guarantees, because Eskom's guarantees is not worth anything. It'll have to be a sovereign guarantee. And within 48 hours, you can have up to 300 megawatts delivered by air onto the grid, provided Eskom's done its homework.
From where?
From emergency suppliers who do this worldwide. Wherever there's an earthquake, wherever there's a catastrophe, these power units are flown in. Within 48 hours, they are on the grid and supplying power.
So if that's an option, why aren't we doing it?
It's very expensive,
but
much cheaper than losing your economy.
Look, these plants are, some of them are over 37 years old.
That's not an excuse.
But where's the space now to maintain them and refurbish them?
Well, you haven't got the space. That's why I'm saying import 5 gigawatts of power. That'll give you a chance to take 2 or 3 power stations down, refurbish them properly, not this patchy maintenance. And then after a year and a half, put them back onto the grid. And in the refurbishment, you'd probably want to clean up the emissions, which is a big problem for a lot of the power stations. I mean, Kendall is on the cusp of closing down 2 units because of excessive emissions. And as far as the 37-year-old is concerned, I don't know when last you flew on SAA, but most of their aircraft are older than 20 years.
Right.
And indeed, at one stage, some of the aircraft were 40 years old, and you flew blissfully. The problem isn't the age of the unit, it's the maintenance program.
Right.
Because if it's done properly, it theoretically is available for more than 100
What's
years.
the lifespan? 100 years, you say?
There are power stations of over 100 years still supplying power efficiently.
Look, what about the medium to long-term strategy in terms of gas capability, nuclear, wind, solar, that should be invested in?
Well, unfortunately, the IRP has been part of the politicking that's been going on for the last 10 to 12 years, where certain proponents were proposing nuclear, but a corrupted nuclear. I was on record as saying a proper nuclear shouldn't cost you more than 250 billion rand. And unfortunately, now we've got a half-baked coal program at Kusile and Medupi, which are each going to cost us more than 250 billion rand. So proper nuclear is, of course, the answer. Small nuclear, absolutely a gift from heaven, because they can be deployed in a very short time and they can be distributed all over the grid. You don't need to strengthen the grid to deploy those. Whereas if you add big chunks of power at any one central point, you need to do grid strengthening, and that's also very expensive.
Look, we're told about plans being in place, the integrated resource plan being one of them. But it's one thing to have a plan, the other is to implement the plan. What's your take on this plan?
Okay, so the integrated plan, again, as I said, was the subject of a lot of politicking, and it's pie in the sky. I think that the notion of having a central plan is outdated. I think it's legacy stuff. I think we need to go back to pure market forces and let the market decide what we need and when we need it. And that means opening up the grid. There are lots of players who would be very interested in participating on an even playing field, rather than perpetuating the monopolistic situation with terrible prices. I mean, the prices of Eskom power is between 50% and 75% higher than what it should be.
Look, procurement from independent power producers, what would that signal to the market?
Well, the moment that you indicate that the market is open, you would get proponents coming forward with their solutions. And the fact of the matter is that the only criteria that should be regulating the situation is availability and pricing. Let the market decide your pricing and just make sure that whatever you put on the grid. So this casts a big aspersion on renewables, because the renewables that you and I see in our economy have had no dispatchability. In other words, you can't plan for the solar program to work tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. If it's a cloudy day, it's not available. Similar for wind. The availability of wind and solar is below 20%. And you can't run an economy like ours, a first world economy with smelters and mines and people's lives at risk. You cannot run it on non-dispatchable power. So whatever renewables we do, if it's hydrogen, that's also fine. If it's hydro, we don't have a lot of hydro in this country, so that's pie in the sky. As far as gas is concerned, I mean, I've seen notions of South Africa making approaches to Mozambique to effectively become the 10th province and make use of a vast. The Mozambican gas fields are about 20 times larger than most other gas fields and would propel the whole of Africa for more than 400 years.
Ted, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for your expertise, your perspective. Appreciate it. All right, Ted Blom is an energy analyst. We're going to take a quick break. We're keeping a close eye on what's happening in Kimberley. Okay, let's not